accounting, tax, and business consulting firm committed to supporting Canadian business owners and communities. The firm created the MNP COVID-19 Business Advice Center to provide timely insights and practical solutions to help organizations navigate uncertainty and adapt to the evolving landscape. Their experts across the country are closely monitoring the rapid changes to provide up-to-date content that is relevant to businesses in our communities. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. First off, this webinar is being recorded and a copy will be made available on the City of Brampton's Economic Development's YouTube account. A link to the recording will be sent to you via email, along with a copy of today's presentation. You should expect that in your inbox later this afternoon. We will have time at the end for Q&A. Everyone will be muted, so please use the question box on your participant control panel to type in your questions. You can do this throughout the presentation, or you can save it until the end. In the event we're unable to get to your question this morning, you're welcome to email us or Tyril directly. His contact information will be available at the end of the presentation. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today, who's going to talk to us about bookkeeping. This is a subject in which we should all be deeply interested in because it's by avoiding financial errors that we can best ensure our financial futures and get us bookkeeping like a pro. Tyril Froese is a partner with MNP's Assurance and Accounting Group in Mississauga, working closely with a wide range of clients, including small and large privately owned companies. Ty delivers a full range of tax, assurance, and advisory services. He has a clear understanding of the challenges his clients face in the local and global marketplace and uses his knowledge and expertise to develop solutions for business structuring, business plans, financial projections, audits, and review of corporate statements. Ty is also the Peel Regional Champion for MNP's outsourced accounting and bookkeeping service line, Ease. Please join me in welcoming Ty.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Jen, and welcome here, everybody. This is sort of a new one for me, doing the webinar. I'm used to seeing everybody's faces and being able to judge the crowd a little bit, and at the eye rolls, at the groaners, I like to throw a little bit of humor into my presentation because accounting, well, not for me, it's pretty exciting stuff, but it can be some dry stuff. So I like to throw in some humor inside there and like to be able to see everybody's faces when I do that. But here we are in a new age, and certainly times have changed. As Jen noted, I'm a partner here in the Mississauga office. We're right across from Square One, and sitting in the office here today. I just moved to Mississauga from Manitoba, actually, so have a daughter attending the National Ballet School, so we decided to pack up the family and move to Beverly. So what we're going to be talking about today is bookkeeping essentials. Didn't come here to talk about me and my family, so we're going to be looking at a whole host of different items, and like Jen said, there's a Q&A session at the end. But of course, if I'm going too fast or talking through anything, I mean, please feel free to pop some comments in the chat, and we'll try to address that as well. The agenda for today that we'll be looking at is the importance of bookkeeping. So why should we even care about doing bookkeeping? We're going to look at the differences between bookkeeping and accounting. We're going to look at the actual process of bookkeeping. We're going to look at how we're going to be doing the bookkeeping. Is it internal or external? Some of the different software that you can use, and then of course the filing requirements. So I'm going to be going through this at a relatively high level, given that Jen only told me I had 6 hours for this webinar. So it's I tried to condense it, and we'll get you out of here before supper tonight. Once again, the groaners. It just doesn't work when I'm talking to myself here. So the importance of bookkeeping. Why should we care about doing the bookkeeping? I mean, too many times I see businesses that they're starting up and they're starting their business out, whether they're selling products, they're selling services, whatever the case may be, and so many entrepreneurs, this is the last thing that people think about. It's what, I've got money in my bank account, business must be running good. Why should I care about the bookkeeping aspect of it? Seems like a headache. And for so many people, this is one of the things that gets pushed aside and left until, of course, there's an absolute reason to do it. So who is using bookkeeping? And really there's two different users for the information that's prepared in bookkeeping. One of them being internal and the other being external. So this is the part where I usually like to ask the crowd as to why would these people care about that? And of course, since we can't do that today, we'll just kind of run through these pieces as to why they might care about the bookkeeping. So internally, management is a group of the users for the internal bookkeeping. Now, why might management care about the bookkeeping records? Well, management is in charge of looking after the business operations and making things are running efficiently, smoothly, and profitably. And without data to analyze in order to do that, it's extremely difficult for management to be able to assess how a business is doing. Management looks at bookkeeping in a very different way than the other users. Management is looking at this as a means to become more profitable, as a means to grow the business, and as a means to identifying problems that may be arising within the business. So there's one of the users of the internal bookkeeping. Second one is the internal accountants. And now this one can be popped in both sectors. It could be internal and external users. But the accountants are certainly another group of people, myself included, that likes to look at the bookkeeping. It helps us to take an outside view from an external user. It helps us to take an outside look at how the business is doing. And really, it's our snapshot into what is happening with the company. So without a set of financial statements, it's really difficult for us as an external user who is not in the business on a day-to-day basis to be able to see what's going on. And the financial statements and the bookkeeping side of things is really the snapshot into the business that tells us the story as to how things are going. Internally, if you have a business of size where you have internal accountants, they're also going to want to look at these financial statements for those, or internal bookkeeping records for those purposes. Owners, in many cases, are like the management of the company. In most small businesses, as you all know, your owners are your management of the company. So they really have very similar needs for the bookkeeping records as what management does, because in most cases, they are one and the same in a startup business. So owners are looking at, is the business profitable? Am I going to have money in order to make my payroll, in order to take money home to feed my own family, in order to do all these different things? So the owners really need to look at the bookkeeping in order to be able to see what's going on. Now, like I mentioned, a lot of times, they'll look at the bank statement as a way of doing that and just say, well, there's money in the bank, things must be fine. And a lot of times that really doesn't tell the entire picture. What if there are held checks that have gone out that just aren't cashed? What if there are invoices that have come in that need to be paid that are over and above what's in the bank account? So the bank statement doesn't always tell the whole picture, but is all too often used as a sole source of seeing how a business is done, absent of any bookkeeping. Other external users of bookkeeping records, of course, are CRA. Now, CRA requires your internal bookkeeping to be done in order for a host of different filings, which we will look at later. But they are certainly somebody that we need to be concerned about in terms of who we're doing or how we're doing our bookkeeping. The bank and also vendors and other creditors are also people that are going to be looking at your bookkeeping. The bank in terms of assessing your creditworthiness, in terms of assessing whether or not you are on-side or off-side on loans or any sort of ventures that you have with them, and vendors and creditors for the same purposes. Vendors a lot of times will extend credit to you in order for your purchasing, and they will need to see some sort of internal income statement or a balance sheet in order to be able to assess your creditworthiness in order to be able to extend your credit. So bookkeeping really plays a major role in doing a lot of functions in your business, not only telling you how your business is doing, but also to allow you to remain on side with CRA, bank, different vendors and creditors, and allow you to do business better. So I did talk a little bit about bookkeeping and financial statements and different things. So a lot of times bookkeeping and accounting are used interchangeably And for the purposes of this presentation and really for what we're discussing, there are some key differences to take away in terms of bookkeeping versus accounting. And like I said, a lot of times they can be used interchangeably, but for the purposes of this, we're going to be talking about bookkeeping. And you can see some of the differences as listed there on the screen. Bookkeeping is essentially the data entry of financial transactions. So when something happens, it gets recorded, and that is the bookkeeping aspect. From an accounting standpoint, all of the financial transactions which happen during the year, which have been recorded through the bookkeeping side, are then summarized and recorded in a set of financial statements, and this is the accounting side of the bookkeeping matrix. In bookkeeping, we're dealing with factual data. So this is, you know what, we sold a widget, we took in money from the customer, it hit the bank account. This gets recorded as the factual data. Accounting also deals with this factual data, but also deals with estimates. You'll know that for accounting purposes, that say property, plant, and equipment, for example, is a good one, where something didn't actually occur. However, we estimate that the value of equipment decreases every year. And so therefore we record that estimation as depreciation or amortization expense. It wasn't actual factual data. We didn't write a check, nothing happened in order to make that equipment less valuable. It's just an estimate that we do, and we record that from an accounting standpoint. Bookkeeping is also most often, or not most often, but it can be done by individuals without sort of any formal training or letters behind their name. So I do see quite often, especially in startup businesses, where of course the business owner doesn't have any sort of accounting degree. I know we all should have accounting degrees. I think it's all exciting stuff, but that not being the case, most times people don't have that and can still do all of the bookkeeping that's necessary in order to record all the transactions. With a bit of training, you know, you can pick up the whatever happened, something hit the bank account. All that's needed is to record that in a proper ledger, and you've done your bookkeeping. Accounting, on the other side, requires a little bit more in-depth knowledge of the accounting framework and relevant laws. So from our standpoint, we're looking at compliance with the accounting regulatory frameworks, especially if we're doing a review or an audit engagement where the financial statements are required to comply with either ASPE or IFRS. So we have to have a knowledge of the handbook in order to make sure that the financial statements are in compliance and they follow all the rules. So a little bit of a difference there between bookkeeping and accounting. So what exactly does happen in the bookkeeping process? There has to be something, because we said in the previous slide that bookkeeping is on a factual, it's recording a factual data. Something has to have started, an event has to have occurred in order to trigger the need for recording it or bookkeeping. So where does it start? Where does the data origination start? And this can be a whole multitude of different places, and it's not necessarily the same for every business. This can be, for example, your point of sale system, the POS. So if you're running a business where you're selling items and customer can walk into your store, I know it's a little bit more difficult nowadays with COVID, but if the customer walks into your store and purchases something, that's going to be running through your point of sale system. It can be as simple as having a cash register with a tape on it, which I think we've mostly gone away. It can be running through your cube on your iPhone. It can be running through any sort of host of different point of sale system. The fact of it is that there was a sale that was running through some sort of a system, and this is your origination for the data. Now, when that happens, this needs to get recorded somewhere. The nice thing with the digital technology, like the cube now, or many of the other different handheld or phone-held devices, is that this does actually keep record of these reports for you, so that it's not that when the sale happens, you're madly writing this down in your manual ledger and trying to record it. You can print off a report at the end of the day from your point of sale system which then can get recorded into your accounting software. Now, a lot of times, you know, what we'll see at the end of the day is that these tapes just get added up or they just get put aside. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, you've got a whole year's worth of tapes, and then you're madly trying to go through and figure out what happened. Definitely don't recommend that. But at some level, you know, you need to go through and be recording these tapes that happened into some sort of an accounting system. And we'll get more into the different types of accounting systems, but it doesn't have to be something that's complex or as like Oracle. It can be something as simple as, you know, a manual ledger if you're not doing many transactions, and that would suffice, or an Excel log, or just some form of bookkeeping process. It can originate from a PO. So if you issue a product order, this can be the origination for recording this into your bookkeeping system. Alternatively, another system is just going through your bank statement. So this quite often is the case when you don't have a lot of transactions that are happening. You can simply look at your bank statement and say, okay, here's all of the transactions that happened for the month, or even for the day. If you're looking at your online bank statements, you can say, here's all the transactions which happened, and pick those up and record those into your bookkeeping system. The nice thing with this as well is that there's a whole multitude of different bookkeeping software that now make this really easy to do, where they will take your bank feeds and put them directly into your bookkeeping software. And so that you know that you're not transcribing any numbers, you're not missing anything anywhere. It's a matter of then going in and classifying these items and making sure they're in the right accounts. But this is definitely something that can be done to make life a whole lot easier at the end of the day. After we have an origination, so something happens, we then have to look, okay, now how do we classify this? So in the example that I used previously with the bank statement feeds going into your bookkeeping system, we then have to look at, okay, now where should this go in my bookkeeping? And there's two main statements where we have to look at where this is going to go. One is your profit and loss statement, your P&L or your income statement, and the other would be your balance sheet. So the difference between the two, and I won't get into many detailed accounts inside these, but your income and expenses will be your revenue items. It'll be your items that you pay for that are consumed in general. So you're making income, you make a sale, that will be on your income statement. If you're paying for your rent, you're paying for your hydro and utilities, you're paying for salaries and wages, or you're paying for repairs and maintenance on your place, you're paying for all of these different items, those would be onto your income statement. So when something happens on your bank statement, if you're using your bank feeds, this gets put into your bookkeeping software. But let's say, for example, that you have something that you bought from, I'll just say Home Depot. This could be an asset. It could be a major item that you purchased that is going to be an asset for your store, in which case it would go on your balance sheet. Or perhaps it's something that's a repairs and maintenance item, which needs to go onto your income statement. So it's not a foolproof system that you don't have to do any work at, and it just pops it in and you can forget about it. It still is a matter of having to classify where items go, but it definitely makes life easier in terms of just being able to go through items that are already posted, classify whether it's income, expense, a withdrawal or deposit, and being able to do that. Finally, you have your recording. So now that we've got all these items inside our bookkeeping software, it's recorded in there. And then filing. Filing is an important piece of the whole thing, and quite often it gets missed. Filing is required for CRA. You're required to keep your invoices, your receipts for a period of 7 years. Now, just recently, this has changed a little bit, not in terms of the length of time, but in terms of the format in which it can be done. Previously, where they would require paper copies of everything, they are now accepting digital copies. So what we've seen is, for example, where our clients are using software called, say, Receipt Bank, where they take a photo of their receipt, and it automatically gets uploaded into their receipt bank account. CRA then later on, when they're performing an audit, they are accepting these photos of the receipts as acceptable audit evidence. But filing is important, whether it be a system of you keep it in filing folders, or you keep it in, your receipt bank account, and then you put them all away. You can file it by month, you can file it by expense or income item. There are a whole multitude of different ways of filing it. Just have some sort of a system where you can access these records later. And this is all important if, say, for example, you get a month down the road in a project that you're working on, and somebody calls you up and says, hey, you know what, we're not paying this invoice. What was it for? Where you can go back, you can look in your system, and you can easily find it. It's going to save you time. It's going to save you headaches, especially in the case of a CRA audit where you don't want to be the one to give them the shoebox and say, here you go. If you're getting an external accountant to do your stuff, you don't want to be handing them a shoebox and saying, here you go, because that's going to cost you more. So filing, although it seems like a simple thing, is all important in this as well. Now, who do we get to do this? Well, again, there's really the two main options. One is in-house, and the other is external. So if we're doing this in-house, and again, when you're starting up your business at the very beginning, really you're wearing a lot of hats, and quite often the owner, the manager, also is the bookkeeper. I've seen this. I've also seen spouses who quite often get involved in doing the bookkeeping, and I would consider this in-house, but you're doing a whole host of different duties. This is the double duty, I call it. Or, you know what, then who's going to be doing this? At the start, if your business is not complex, if there are not a lot of complex transactions that are going on inside there, this will probably suffice. The key is that you want to make sure that as the business owner, as the business manager, that you are spending the time that you need on focusing on the business in order to make the business profitable, as opposed to data entry, which can be subbed out, and having somebody to look after that. Now, if you're hiring somebody, what does this need to be? Do we really need a full-time person, or is a part-time going to suffice? There are a lot of different options out there where you can have part-time bookkeepers. There are a lot of different companies that do this, and they will come in, they will be part of your team, and they may come in once a week. They may come in, twice a month, whatever the case may be. But this is a really good option if you're looking to just take this off your hands, because most people throw their hands up in the air, and this is a major headache for them in getting the bookkeeping done. If you're doing it internally, what type of software are you going to need? And I'll touch on this in the next slide a little bit as well, but it really comes down to then what type of business are you running? What are you going to need to do? And we'll look at that in a little bit more detail. You can get it done externally. So external is a good option for you if this is really something that is foreign, that you really have no time for. Your business is getting up off the ground and running, and you know what? You don't have time maybe to sit down at the end of the night, or at the end of the night when it hits midnight or 1 o'clock and you're done and you've closed up shop and you're at home. The last thing you want to do is go through the receipts for the day and start bookkeeping and record them. So external is a really good option that you can run to. And again, here, you can hire external bookkeepers to do this for you. M&P has a great system, and I promise I won't make a sales pitch inside here, but what we do for our clients is it's a fully cloud-based, and like Jen mentioned, I run this for our region. It's a fully cloud-based system where basically all your records get uploaded into the system. We look after doing all of that coding, all of that classification, all of the bank pulls, all of that, the reconciliations, and making sure that's all entered. And at the end of the day, you can go in and access all of that, and you can see where things are at without actually having to have done any of that yourself. Now, a nice thing of getting an external system is if you do this in conjunction with your external accountants who are going to be doing your corporation year end, your T2 filings and that, is that you can have some systems integration. Your bookkeeping software can flow into, for example, into your financial statements, which then flows into your tax return. And at the end of the day, the goal of it all is to be able to save you time and money. It provides you access to specialized services. So you know what? What does a set of financial statements tell you? Well, if you're not used to looking at a set of financial statements, have never taken anything like it in university or any college courses or anything like that, a set of financial statements looks foreign to most people. There's a lot of numbers on the page, and it's just a big bunch of numbers that you might know the top might have to balance with the bottom, but that's about as far as it gets. Using an external bookkeeper to look at your statements may give you extra insight that you may not otherwise have just by doing it internally. They can look at a set of financial statements and be able to tell you, you know what, your margin on this one particular item has dropped, or it's lower than your margins on these other items. You may want to increase your pricing on it, or you may want to focus on selling this other one because it's more profitable to you at the end of the day. They're able to tell you, you know what, you need to make this many sales in your next couple of weeks in order to be able to break even or to be profitable, or there's a whole host of different specialized services that can come from it, where if an external bookkeeper is looking at your records, where they may be able to help you. And again, as noted, the accounting integration. So when we do the bookkeeping, it integrates together with our accounting software that we can do the tax return and the financial statements with. And really, it's something that we as external accountants can look at on a regular basis and can talk to clients a long time in advance before we hit to their typical, once a year accountant meeting, and be able to say, you know what, it looks like this is really growing. Your cash balance is really growing inside the company. We may want to think of restructuring in order to be able to protect that and credit approve for a whole host of different things that it opens up the doors to. So in-house, 100% doable, most cost effective. You're doing it yourself, and in most cases, at the start, that's all that you're going to need. It's just something to be aware of, that once it starts taking up too much of your time and you're not able to focus on your business, or if you find yourself getting behind in recording items, that's not a place where you want to be, and then you can go external. So I mentioned briefly in the previous slide about bookkeeping software. So what happens if you do decide to go internally? And I won't get too in-depth into these individual softwares themselves. There really is a couple of different options for you to go. Well, there's a lot of different options for you to go. There are some of the main providers, which probably most of you will know. There's off-the-shelf software. So Sage, they now have Intact. It used to be Simply Accounting. Great off-the-counter software that you can use, and in a simple business, it's going to be able to provide everything that you need in order to do all of your regular bookkeeping. QuickBooks is probably the most familiar one that everybody's familiar with. Again, a very user-intuitive software that anybody can pick up, and it really provides you with a lot of walkthroughs. Anything that you have questions on, there's a great community that you can get assistance with, and it really is, for most businesses, it's all that's needed in terms of bookkeeping software. Cloud-based is something that is not completely new, but is still relatively new. And both Sage and QuickBooks offer their cloud-based accounting systems, so you can do QuickBooks online. And the advantage of cloud-based bookkeeping software is that you have access to it at any time, at any place. So, for example, if you're out at a customer's place and you're dealing, say, on a major order, you're able to go onto your smartphone or have your tablet up and be able to look and see what, say, cost on one of your product is, in order to be able to say if you can, go down to the price that they're asking or anything like that. It provides you real-time access to the data from anywhere. Your bookkeeper, if they're external or somebody hired, can be working from home and be able to do this, and it's not required for them to be in the office. And it really provides a lot of benefits from doing it online. Xero is another very popular software that's based out of New Zealand, but is growing in leaps and bounds here in Canada, and is a fantastic other option as well from a cloud-based perspective. There's, again, I won't go into them all, there's Cashew and there's all the different ones from that, but really, those are your main kind of staples where you can start and go from there. Customized software really gets into, and this would fall for industry specific as well, really gets into if you have a business that's a large business. Let's say, for example, that you have multiple different corporations that you need to run consolidations of those companies, or you need to have a really complex data set that you're mining for KPIs or tons of transactions. Then you get into the larger ones. You get into the Great Plains, you get into the Oracles, you get into SAP, which is really, it's a full customer system as well, not just a bookkeeping system, but these again are very costly products. They can be customized to meet any of your transaction needs, to feed from your different point of sale systems in order to get them into there and in order to do consolidations in that. So again, if your business is large or you have multiple entities, or you're doing complex transactions, that type of thing, these would be more what you're looking at. Or you do also have at the end, so you've got industry specific software. So if you're doing, let's say, for example, you're doing property management, so you might want to use Yardi. Or if you're farming or you have an agricultural based business, Ag Expert is a software that's great for looking after some of the complexities of farming. Let's say your crop growth or your animal births or different things that well, how do you record that? Well, Ag Expert is able to do that. If you're looking at project management or project cost accounting and different things like that, Deltek Vision is another one that's out there. So there's a whole host of different industry specific softwares that may be able to fit the need of your business. But again, I would only look into these types of items if you're having maybe a larger business where some of the transactions are more complex and some of the items may not be able to be handled by QuickBooks. But again, those general ones off the shelf are able to handle most of the startups and other businesses as you go along. So we get into filing requirements. So what does bookkeeping help you to do? So we have payroll. So of course you're required to keep track of all of the amounts that you're paying, whether if it's just yourself, if you're paying yourself on the payroll, if you're paying your staff, if you're paying whoever. Payroll is one of your filing requirements. So you're required then to submit your payroll on a regular ongoing basis to CRA, and you're going to need your bookkeeping records for this. HST is another one where you're going to need your bookkeeping records for this. You need to have been recording how much is split up from your sales into how much HST you collected, provided, of course, your business is HST registered or is required to be. And for your own purposes, you're going to want to know how much HST that you've paid on your expenses in order to be able to collect that back. Corporate taxes, the most fun thing for everybody that we all love paying. And of course, they were extended this year, but corporate taxes are something where you need your bookkeeping records for. Your EHT, your bank required filings or OSC filings, all different places where you're going to be, where you're required to have all of your bookkeeping software up to date and all of your records up to date in order to be able to provide to these different places that are going to require these. So bookkeeping is really an important part of your business. It really is, one of the last things that people look at when they're doing their business, just because it's probably one of the most unknown things for everybody. You didn't get into business to be able to record transactions on financial statements. You got into business in order to sell what you're comfortable with or what you're used to doing. So there really is, like I said, a whole host of different reasons why it's important. There's reasons why you can do it internally or externally, and there's not one solution that fits everybody's needs. Internally can be for one person, whereas externally for another person. So the real thing is to find what's right for you, just making sure that it gets done on a regular, recurring, ongoing basis. So that was everything that I had to go through today. Like I said, I usually like to get a bunch of interaction and going through and discussions going on these points, but unfortunately in the formatting, we're not able to do that so much. But as Jen said, I'd like to open it up at this point if there's questions that people have.
Great, thank you, Ty. So there were a few questions that came in during your presentation. The first question is in regards to keeping receipts. I know you touched on the fact that digital or electronic records are now allowed. Is a bank transaction or credit card statement enough, or do you need an actual detailed receipt or statement?
So that's a great question, and the answer to that is no. A bank statement nor a credit card statement are not sufficient for CRA purposes. You need to have, whether it be, like I said, in digital or paper format, it is fine, but it has to have that invoice or that receipt in order to satisfy CRA's needs. So they won't accept if you go to them and say, well, look, this is my business bank credit card, or this is my business credit card, and so all transactions on here are business related. They won't accept that statement as that, and they can, and I have seen them throw all the expenses out where there's no actual invoice or receipt for it.
Great, thank you. Another question is, how often should a small business, sorry, just lost it. How often should a small business just starting out be processing the data for bookkeeping?
So that's another really good question, and I don't think there is a 100% size fits all right answer for that. The key thing to do would be to do it on a regular, ongoing basis, which enables you to be able to get useful information on it. So you do have, of course, your regulatory filing requirements. So let's take your HST, for example, where most often that's required to be filed, or we get it set up to be filed on a quarterly basis. So there's one thing that's going to force you or require you in order to look at this stuff at least every 3 months. That being the case, if you're looking at more pertinent data, 3 months probably isn't sufficient in order to be able to look at something and see how it's actually going. If you're starting up, for example, you're going to want to be looking at your data probably on a weekly basis, if not even on a daily basis in some cases. If you're starting up, cash is always going to be an issue unless you started off with a massive chunk of cash for your business. And so really having a good handle on where your cash is on a daily basis, vis-a-vis recording your transactions, recording checks that you've written and sent out that have not yet cashed, recording any sales that you've made that maybe you haven't collected cash on yet, and really being able to monitor that is going to be really important in order to make sure that your startup business is going. Now, a daily basis may be a little bit onerous as well, because there's a million and one other things that you're doing when you're starting up your business and getting everything set up. So maybe it is on a weekly basis that that you do a proper setup of your bookkeeping and make sure that everything is reconciled. But again, making sure that it's consistent, setting aside time to do it. And I live and die by my calendar. That's my work here. If it's not on my calendar, I always joke it doesn't happen. So setting time, actual time to be able to do this and setting it aside to do it, I find to be one of the most useful and helpful things for people. And really, you get to see more of a proper handle, and you're able to manage your business effectively if you're recording it on a regular basis and you can see what's going on before bigger issues arise or you miss something.
That's great. Another question is, what software could be relevant when my business is just receiving commissions, not just retail sales?
So if it's something that's where you're not doing retail sales or you're doing any of that, again, any one of the off-the-shelf softwares is going to be good to use in that case. If you look at QuickBooks has varying different, we'll just use it as an example because it's probably the most familiar one. QuickBooks has varying different degrees of their program that you can use. in order to, customize it to your needs. So you may not have payroll, you may not have inventory, you may not have any of those types of items if you're just collecting commissions for your business. And so something then as simple as QuickBooks Online or Cashew or Xero are going to suffice for your needs 100% and be completely cost effective as well. I mean, some of these are, $9.99 a month or something like that. And so they're really going to be cost effective and be able to handle anything that you throw at them. So I would suggest just going off the shelf in a case like that, and you're able to handle that.
Great, thanks, Ty. Another question, can you please define EHT and OSC filings?
Oh, yes, sorry. EHT is your employer health tax filings. So what that is the when your payroll for your company, I know here in Ontario they just bumped it up to 495,000. So when your payroll exceeds that amount, there is a tax that the lovely government hits you with in order to, and I know in Manitoba where it came from, it was different. It was even a much lower number where they start dinging you. But so that's the employer health tax amount, and the OSC is the Securities Commission's filings. So that pertains more to, say, a larger company that's gone public or is thinking to go public, or if you're taking your company that way, there are so many regulatory filings that the Ontario Securities Commission has, and they need to have, you need to have, of course, proper bookkeeping and financial statements for those. So apologize, some of those acronyms are just brushed through there. So that's what those are.
No problem, thanks. For someone who wants to start bookkeeping for a simple new business using an Excel spreadsheet, can you suggest the various headings or items that we should be recording?
Absolutely. And so I do actually provide my clients that come in to me with a sample bookkeeping GL software or Excel format that you can use. And I'd be happy to share it as well with anybody afterwards if you want to email me on that to give you more. But the key thing to have is your bank columns. So the most important piece is that you have your bank ins and outs recorded. And I didn't go through this as much as what I should have earlier when we were talking about the process, but it's really important that for a startup business or for any business that you have a separate bank account where you run through all of your business expenses and income through. It keeps everything so much easier when you're recording it if you're not trying to figure out if that Walmart receipt or that Home Depot receipt was personal, or if it had groceries included in it, or if it should have been all business related. So having that separate bank account is all important, so that when you're going through transactions, you know that every single transaction that hits that bank account has to be recorded in your Excel or your bookkeeping spreadsheet. So you've got your bank ins and outs on your Excel sheet, and after that point, it really is coming up with the key categories that your business is running into. For income, for example, if you're selling 3 different products, what I would do is I would have those 3 different products as your different columns in that Excel spreadsheet, and you're able to record then your sales item and making sure that it hits the bank and hits that sales item. So there's the 2 spots where it has to be, and at the end of your entire row, it always should balance out to 0 to make sure that you know that you've recorded everything properly. So you have your sales items, and then from an expense standpoint, the exact same thing. It's making sure, so if you're paying rent, for example, if you're paying your utilities, if you're purchasing products, if you're paying salaries and wages, if you have automobile expenses, they may be, your gas, your insurance, or any of those types of things. So it really is picking up on those main types of things that you spend on a regular ongoing basis. And then, you know what, I always laugh, but it's a good thing to have, is I have a lot of people have their Ask My Accountant column in there as well. And so that if it's something that you don't know, rather than putting it somewhere which may be incorrect, we're more than happy to look at it at the end of the year and say, oh, what was this? And just making sure you have a note beside it. So Having notes is also key when you're looking back, if you ever need to look back at something. It doesn't have to, if it's obvious, of course, if it's gas for your vehicle, or if you have Petro-Canada or Shell or whatever receipt, you don't need an elaborate note. But if you have a payment going out that may not be, it may not be intuitive as to what it is, just have a little note beside it and saying what that is. And the final thing in terms of the columns is making sure you have your HST broken out as well. So, you make sure you have in your sales, for example, you have your total sale amount, you have your HST amount, which you have collected, and then the offset for both of those is the bank in account. So at the end of the day, again, it all matches, but in that way you have it recorded and you've split out your HST so that you can do your regulatory filings on that. And again, happy to, I'll flip it over to the next slide here, so that's sitting on the screen for everybody. Like I said, happy to share that with anybody that wants to send an email on it. And again, the nice thing with Excel is that you can customize it to fit your own needs as well. And it doesn't have to be something that's overly complex. Just the key thing is having the bank and then your ins and your outs.
Great. I know you touched on this in the presentation, but how long can you or should you keep your bookkeeping records?
So from a strictly requirement standpoint, CRA requires that you keep your records for a period of 7 years. So that's really the only regulatory requirement for keeping your records. After that, it really becomes a space issue. I've seen clients having, where their warehouse is full of boxes going back to 1980s, and it really becomes at that point, is there any intrinsic value in that? But there are times I've had a client where he had a lawsuit that went back past the 7 years, where he had his records to go back and be able to prove his side of the suit. And so in that case, having records that surpass the requirement of 7 years assisted him for that. So, in a regular business, I would say that if you're going past 7 years, there's a lowering degree of value that any of that information would provide for you. But again, there may be some, so feel free to keep it. It just becomes if it's taking up space, whether that be data storage space and you're required to pay more for that data storage, or if it's actual physical space in terms of your invoices and paperwork, then you can by all means start getting rid of it after that 7-year period.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ty. We have a few more questions. It looks like we do have some time left. So just a reminder, if you do have a question that you would like asked, please use the question box on your control panel to type in your question, and we'll do our best to get to it. So a new question that just came in. I've just started researching and testing since January and only registered my business this month. For my books and accounting purposes, should I account for the expenses incurred since January? And I know this is a question we get asked quite often at the Entrepreneur Center.
And the answer to that is absolutely. So if you've, we'll just say, for example, that you've incorporated just recently. However, these expenses that you incurred were all related to this business that you started up. Those items, because they are all business related, are treated as expense items. So even though they happened before the business was legitimately started up, they are still expense items. If it was prior to you incorporating, or if you've just registered your business and you're still a sole proprietor, those items still create a loss for you, and you're able to then carry those losses forward and to be able to offset it against your other income that you're having, presumably at this time, to live on your personal means. So yes, definitely record those items, whether it gets picked up in the corporation, for example, as amounts that are then owed to you personally, because it should have been an expense of the company is fine. The kicker in all of it is that you cannot go back for HST purposes and get any of those credits back that you may have paid. So what I always suggest to somebody is that if they're starting up a new venture, and even if they don't expect to start earning income within the next short time, is still register for HST. And you can do this as a proprietor, as a partnership, or as a corporation. Your three different sort of levels of ownership. You can do this and register for HST and start collecting those tax credits back that you're paying out. Because so long as it all pertains to the eventual goal of earning business income, you can claim those credits, and you're able to do that. So that's the long answer to the short yes. You can claim those. It's just a matter of how it gets picked up.
Great, thanks. Is there anything I need to be aware of to receive payments from international clients?
Now, there goes to a whole host of different things. and we're really getting more into the tax side of that as opposed to the bookkeeping side. So from a strictly bookkeeping record side of it, it's really no different anywhere that this comes from. You have an origination, you have your recording of it, and you have it hitting your bank. There may be more complexities in terms of foreign exchange and reporting any of those items. But the key side of that really is when it boils down to from a tax perspective. And there's a litany of things that need to be considered, and considering which country it's coming from, whether or not Canada has a foreign tax treaty with that country, whether or not you have boots on the ground salesperson constituting a permanent establishment in one of those places, or whether or not it's just a sales that's coming from there, whether it's professional, whether it's services that you're rendering here or in that place, how it's constituted in terms of where it's going to get taxed. So there, if you are having any sort of foreign sales, I would say definitely have a chat with your advisor, and certainly somebody who is a foreign tax specialist, which we have inside our office here. We have a number of my partners in here just do foreign tax. So whether it be US, whether it be European or Asian, whatever the case may be, but talk to somebody about your specific situation, and just make sure, even if there's no taxes in those places, there may just be filing requirements, regulatory filing requirements, in order to make sure that you don't get dinged with penalties. So just talk to somebody about your specific situation, and definitely do ask about it though.
Great. And just to follow up, we did host a webinar with MNP last month, and it was all around foreign tax requirements and obligations. So if that is something that you're interested in learning more about, we do have the recording of that webinar available on the City of Brampton's Economic Development YouTube account. So when we send you the link for today's recording, you will be able to access our full channel and be able to see some of the other recordings, but that hopefully would be covered in that webinar. Looks like we do have one more question. So how do you calculate the HST to come out or to split it?
So, good question. If your business is now, so I'll go back a little bit on this. You are required to register for HST if your company is earning more than $30,000 in sales. Now, I mentioned before as well, it's also probably beneficial for your company to register for HST prior to starting to earn your sales in order to be able to claim it back. So the question really pertains to the HST on the sales side of things, and that's just a strictly 13% calculation of your sales. So on any of the sales that you make, you are then required to also, if you're registered for HST, you are then required to collect an additional 13% over and above your sales price in order to, and that's really all it is. It's just a straight 13% calculation.
Great. It doesn't look like there are any more questions in the chat. I'll just give it maybe another minute. But if not, while we wait, I'll just want to send a special thanks to Tyril for his great information. It was a wonderful presentation. As I said, it will be recorded and made available if you need to refer back, or if you know somebody that might have missed the session this morning, feel free to send them that link. Great engagement, lots of wonderful questions, so really appreciate your time this morning. And special thanks again to MNP for partnering with us on the Entrepreneurs Connect series in celebration of Small Business Month. So for everybody on today's webinar that might not know, October is recognized as Small Business Month in Canada, in Ontario, and in Brampton. So it's a great time for us to really provide as much information as well as free access to events like these to help you start and grow your business. In saying that, we do have 3 more sessions in this 4-part series that are coming up the next 3 Wednesdays at 11 a.m. So same time. Next week, we have a session on tax sense. October 21st, incorporating your business, and it'll cover everything you need to know about how to get your business incorporated and some of the benefits. And then the last session on October 28th looks at CRA audits, so common tax audit issues and how to prepare for them. So some really great content coming up the next few Wednesdays in the month of October for Small Business Month. So it doesn't look like there's any other questions coming in. Ty has included his contact information on this last slide. We will make sure you get his email in our follow-up email that we'll expect to receive in your inbox later this afternoon. So if there is any follow-up or anything that you need support with, feel free to email either Ty or the Entrepreneur Center at bec@brampton.ca.
Perfect. Thanks so much, everybody.
Great. Thank you again. Hope everyone has a wonderful day, and I hope to see you all next Wednesday. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.